Good morning, everyone. My name is Hollie Hodgson, and I am the Head of Account Management at Tussell. 2024 has been an exciting year for public procurement. With the Act being enshrined at the tail end of last year, we've seen the TPP team work tirelessly to get buyers and suppliers ready for the upcoming changes and to deliver on the central digital platform that they promised. We've also had a new government come in, which promises a fresh perspective, with a clear focus on being mission-led in public procurement. At Tussell, we often describe public procurement as the market hiding in plain sight. It accounts for a third of all public sector spending. It's equivalent to 10% of the UK GDP, and it's in desperate need of transformation. The only problem is, as the new government painstakingly points out, they've inherited a difficult fiscal legacy, and there's limited spare change behind the proverbial sofa. Today, you can expect to hear from a wealth of experts and thought leaders in the developments of public procurement. I'm here to help focus the day's discussion, bringing you a data-led tour to the state of public procurement today, so that we can understand how the Act is going to change the state of play, where the PRU should focus its attention, and how buyers and suppliers can use data to inform what to do next. Let's get started. A quick introduction to Tussell. We are the market's trusted tool on UK public sector procurement. Most of the biggest buyers and suppliers in this room are already long-standing partners of ours, using our data to inform their commercial decisions and take a strategic approach to public contracting. Public procurement has also had its fair share of scandals, and it is rarely out of the news. We've been credited for over 350 citations just this year alone, proofs that when you're reading about government spending on major projects, such as HS2 or key areas like consulting or COVID, Tussell's data is usually at the heart of its analysis. Everything that I'm going to show you today is originally taken from open data, which we've wrangled into useful data through machine learning with human oversight. You may agree or disagree with my findings, but they can all be defended down to the individual underlying contract or invoice. We are starting with the size of the overall public procurement market, looking back to pre-COVID times until the end of the latest financial year. The pandemic had a huge impact on public procurement, causing it to grow by 29% in 2020-2021 fiscal year, as the public sector responded to changing public needs. There was also the implementation of Brexit, which required increased procurement activity, particularly from lawyers and consultants, to ensure that the UK was ready at the end of its transition period. But what's really interesting is that last year it continued to grow, with nearly £226 billion spent with the private sector. I'm well aware that's different to the 300 billion figure that has been put out today. So, well, yeah, potentially with defence being underreported. This is also direct. We're not seeing what's going through the supply chain at the moment. But in other words, COVID was temporary, thank goodness. But the increase in public procurement spending that it prompted is here to stay, with big government well and truly back. This makes the implementation of the Procurement Act particularly timely, as the scale of government's reach grows, as has the need to rethink the regulatory landscape to ensure that the £226 billion that we're outsourcing is delivering the best value for money. COVID demonstrated how dynamic procurement can be and the speed at which government can buy things. But it also showed how flawed that it can be when it comes to these buying decisions, running fair competitions, finding the right suppliers to be engaging with, and making sure that it's compliant with transparency regulations, so there's a clear audit trail. There is also one notable exception in this chart, BEIS. This is due to the sizable parts of its spend relating to grants and subsidiaries, including the Energy Price Guarantee Scheme, which was divvied out to the major energy providers. This isn't public procurement per se, and it would have actually shown a shrinking public sector, so we took it out across all years. We are also seeing changes in the types of suppliers that the public sector is turning to. This chart takes that same time period, but we're highlighting the role of VCSEs, SMEs, the government's strategic suppliers, and other large corporations. The message here is clear. The market share of direct procurement spending has ebbed away from the strategic suppliers to other large corporations. Now, that may be perceived as a big win for those in government, responding to calls to diversify markets, to reduce over-reliance on household names, and offer room for new entrants to break in. Others may reflect on the different styles of managing these suppliers. Unlike the rest of the market, strategic suppliers all have memorandums of understanding in place, a designated Crown rep to help with identifying areas for cost savings. They report on SME and VCSE procurement going through their supply chain, and much more. With great power comes great responsibility, really rings true with the strategic suppliers. And one might question, does the pivot to other large corporations who don't currently have the same level of accountability pose more risk to the public sector? While the Procurement Act should certainly help level the playing field in some areas, so for example, the debarment list, we can see the CCS already putting in place MOUs with other non-strategic suppliers. Areas like reporting of SME and VCSE procurement are going to be hindered. This is particularly important considering central government's pledge for £1 in £3 to be spent with SMEs. Our data shows that despite the growth in procurement spend, the direct market of VCSEs and SMEs hasn't shifted by more than 1% over this period. This next chart shows all direct procurement spending, but we're now splitting it by subsector. Perhaps unsurprisingly, health and social work and construction are consistently the largest sectors by value. This is notable considering the difference in procurement regulations for these industries, with the NHS going live with the provider selector regime at the start of this year. Considering the size and scale, it's key that these parts of the market get it right and ensure that transparency throughout the contract lifecycle is consistently captured. The ability to make insightful decisions starts with putting the data out there. And you might not think it, considering the reps that it gets in the news, but consultancy has consistently been the lowest performing sector by spend over the last 2 financial years. The new government is pushing hard on insourcing consulting to save costs. Looking at this chart, one might consider whether that push on insourcing would be more impactful in another sector. Here we're seeing that split now by parts of the public sector to identify how fiscal responsibilities are shifting over time. Central government spiked during the pandemic, but has actually since fallen year on year. Interestingly, despite the budget cuts, local government is consistently gaining market share. This is directly tied to the increase in spend on health and social care activities. Again, there are a few omissions from this chart due to incomplete spend across the period, including BEIS, MOJ, FCDO, and DBT. Don't worry, I'm not here to tell them off. But these would increase the proportion to central government. But since they haven't published all their data for the last financial year, we don't want to distort the year-on-year view, so we have removed them. This next chart takes the spending by ministerial departments on a consolidated basis, so including the arm's length bodies, and it ranks their total spending by growth over the last 2 financial years. On average, procurement spend grew by 23% across the board. There are some standout buyers in there. DESNZ appears to be shrinking. DFT is much larger than I expected. And as we already pointed out, the MOD is underrepresented in this chart due to the sensitive nature of some of its activities. This is also a really good chart to consider the changing circumstances of a department. For example, parts of the Cabinet Office, so GDS, CDDO, the Incubator for AI, they've now been absorbed into DISIT. This will result in some duplication of services and suppliers, and the procurement teams there will really need to rethink how that budget is being spent. Here we see the impressive procurement route that frameworks and DPS agreements have become, particularly in central government, where 45% of contracts by volume went via a framework or DPS in the last financial year. And we expect this to continue, with the Procurement Act offering new flexible purchasing routes like open frameworks and dynamic markets early next year. But these routes are known for their less than transparent nature. There's no need for buyers to publish tenders via them, only the award notice. And frustratingly, not all call-off contracts are being published. This is despite the transparency regulations placed by the previous regs, the public contracts regulations. It's currently unclear whether or not this will improve with the Procurement Act. Things like transparency and planned procurement notices, they have potential of giving more visibility, but it's really hard to change culture. And if buyers already aren't publishing these, will the additional regulation be enough? Limited data makes it really hard to make intelligent decisions about what procurement route that you should be taking. Our Frameworks Finder tool is actually the only tool out there that provides a comprehensive list of live frameworks with verified data showing their usage based on actual published call-off contracts. It is actually even used by the CCS to verify their own framework reporting. Finally, the state of play over the next 5 years until the end of the current government's term. There are £180 billion worth of re-procurements, with the vast majority of these going through the new procurement rules next year. It'll be exciting to see how these procurements are done differently. Did the new rules allow for fairer competition? Did the taxpayer get better value for money thanks to the Procurement Act? It's really important for buyers to plan ahead, to make sure that they're ready to make use of these new regulations, that they're clear on what their own procurement pipeline looks like, that they're making data to engage with the right suppliers at the right time with the right commercial metrics to succeed. Thank you for listening.